Hello world of YouTube and welcome to another episode of Redacted, the show where every album has a story. And this month, I've kind of gone back and forth on what I really wanted to tackle. Both artists in question released an album this year, so it kind of would have been timely, and it lines up with the broad theme I'm doing with this show, specifically within the year of the sequel. I'm talking about 2020 sequel, 2022. And while the year was stacked with some great releases, as you've seen throughout some of the Redacteds I've done this year, there have been a handful that could have been maybe a little bit better, and the subject of today's video I ultimately was going to shelve because it is two pieces of a puzzle, but that second piece that released recently feels like a lot more of a fuller experience than the first half of it. So my goal then became, which is why I'm doing this now instead of later, to make that first version a little bit more of a fulfilling experience. And I feel like I've done that today. It is the fourth album from British alt-rock, hard rock outfit Boston Manor, Datura. Now, when I first was spinning Datura, I thought it was a pretty good album by the by. It had a good hit ratio as far as quality of songs are considered. I thought it was better than their 2020 outing Glue. However, unlike Glue, I felt like it was a record that felt all too brief, especially for how good it was at creating this heavier, moodier, sort of like emotionally driven soundscape and lyrical palette. It had a good tying of both those ideas. But I thought it was just a record that they decided to sort of like round out, drop, and just, you know, move on to the next thing. That was until I saw them live during Riot Fest that year, and they said that Datura was one of a two-piece sort of experience. So I told myself from that point I would potentially toy with the idea of a Redacted once its other half came out, so I waited. I shelved this idea. I kept retooling the track listing with an EP that dropped a year before, Desperate Times, Desperate Pleasures, with the hopes of maybe blending Datura with this other half in Desperate Times, because Desperate Times sort of has some of the emotional, you know, intensity seen on Datura with a sonic palette that's not too far off from where that record lies. However, 2 years later, and that second half is finally out, Sundiver, and spoilers for my listening log, I think that Sundiver is a much more fulfilling experience, to the point that I retooled my concept of throwing Sundiver into Datura's track listing, and instead going to go with what I was originally working with anyway, and that's putting Desperate Times, Desperate Pleasures into Datura's track listing and creating a more fulfilling, more rounded out experience on the other side. It's a pretty straightforward Redacted by the by, just working an EP into an album, sort of not having it disrupt the flow that the record has going on, while retooling the flow of Datura ever so slightly in the process. My version of Datura is the same number of tracks as Sundiver ended up being. It's 11 tracks, but it's a little bit longer than Sundiver at 42 minutes, and I'm going to break down why I laid each track where I did in the track listing after showing you the track listing right now.
We're just stumbling in the darkness. Leave, 'cause I keep losing my time. You'll never change. We're stuck in your ways. Give me direct. These fucking problems, you following me. Maybe I was by the wayside, never see. I'm the one that you got. I'm only just getting started.
keep the album starting off on the same foot with the Datura Dusk leading into Floodlights on the Square. Dusk is a nice sort of mood-setting, sort of building intro track that has some good catchy melodies that get doubled down on Floodlights in the Square. A track that sort of talks about this toxic-driven mindset that fuels some of the lyrics on here, that gets, again, just more further sort of rounded out with the addition of some of the tracks from Desperate Times. This sort of give and take that comes in a relationship with a mindset as the protagonist is sort of driven with on here. And it's also a really good catchy song that helps sort of kick the record off on a nice catchy foot, full stop. Which from there, I kind of keep that just big, catchy train rolling for the next 3 songs of Carbon Mono, Foxglove, and Algorithm. 3 songs that kind of talk about that back and forth in the relationship while adding a little more attitude and aggression to the album, which I thought was like nice in the pockets that it was there, but definitely needed more of a presence in my opinion, especially given the mood that the album is trying to champion. Carbon Mono and Algorithm are tracks that sort of like lash outward, while Foxglove looks within and sort of analyzes, or at least comes to a realization that maybe the protagonist is the problem. You know, while Carbon Mono and especially Algorithm talks about the give and take in that sort of like parasocial sense on Algorithm, it also kind of goes, it could be seen as going a little deeper to the back and forth in the relationship that sort of gets talked about in other tracks on the record. You know, the whole album feels seated in these highs with a twist, these emotional highs with a lower twist sort of being buried, you know, in subtext. And that was, again, more sort of the mood I just wanted to sustain with the additions I made. You know, Crocus comes after Algorithm more to lean into a little more of a swagger, break up some of the, you know, just big booming anthemic rock jams that have been going for the last couple of tracks. You know, it feels still very primal and emotional in its lyrical tapestry, but it just shifts it ever so slightly into a different realm. That I kind of slow down even further thanks to that, how that song kind of winds down into I Don't Like People and They Don't Like Me. A song that sort of feels cut from the same cloth as Foxglove, but with a different sort of like intense tone given to it. It's a lot more subdued. It still kind of has the swagger from Crocus, but it's not aiming to be as big as Crocus hits the song prior. It just helps sort of wind the album down while going harder on some of those insular conflicts before ramping that intensity back up even more with Desperate Pleasures. You know, when I originally was gonna do Datura, I had toyed with the idea of calling it Desperate Times, Desperate Pleasures, because again, some of the songs from Datura proper kind of lean into those themes, but because Sundiver starts with a Datura Dawn song, I figured I would just keep the branding at that point. But Desperate Pleasures is a really good sort of booming big song. Kind of feels like it's jumping off of the mood from especially I Don't Like People and They Don't Like Me, while being a little bit more confrontational in the sense of what like Foxglove and Algorithm were sort of like going for. It talks about being swept up in loving, being in this kind of relationship, and it's something that sort of helps pivot some of the mood for the last couple of tracks. You know, the chorus of What Comes Around comes straight back around, helps sort of solidify some of the mood of the next couple of tracks, while, again, just adding another big catchy-ass song to the track listing. But from there, I sort of wanted to round out the album and sort of bring some of the themes to a resolve of sorts, even if it does get sort of maybe continued in some parts of Sundiver, with Passenger, Shelter from the Rain, and Inertia. 2 catchy jams sandwiched around an instrumental track that helps, again, sort of just carry the mood of the record. I thought Passenger wasn't in a good place on Datura in general. I thought it was weird to come after Foxglove. It is a song that does feel like it's trying to ramp up towards a conclusion, with sort of being a little more upfront with the relationship that has sort of been teased throughout this, and again, sort of helps get enriched with some of the additions from Desperate Times, like Algorithm and I Don't Like People, being sort of a confessional about being alone in this journey of fame, but still being at the mercy of said fame in the passenger seat. It's a decently, it's a decently written jam that has just a soaring chorus that I think eases well into Shelter from the Rain before that song sort of helps bring in Inertia as this one big, huge final send-off to this record. It's a song that more leans into some of the internal conflict seen on tracks like Carbon Mono, while helping, again, send that mood off into the sunset. I chose the album version over the single version because it has that kind of outro, that like sort of like field recording outro, that I think kind of bleeds really well into Sundiver's beginning. So, I don't know, it's a good bookend to the record with Datura and Inertia. I don't think that it needed to be switched around, but I definitely think that the road to Inertia needed some retooling, and that's why I still kept it at the end, but just laid the track listing out how I did. Did you agree? Do you disagree? Do you want to hear my version of Datura? It is linked in the description with a YouTube and Spotify link. If you did like this, give it a like. If you want to see more, consider subscribing. I drop 2 to 4 vids a week depending on what I've got going on. Thank you again so very much for watching. I have something very special and a nice surprise dropping next week that I hope you guys are excited to check out. Either way, I'm going to go. I've been Viral Rack. You guys have a good day. Lots of situations, and I'll see you another day.